You lose 10 pounds, you will look 10 pounds bigger. I guarantee you that. Okay. This is the illusion. And welcome to the show, dude. Thank you very much.
Hey, this is amazing. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Man, you no, more than happy, dude. Thank you for applying and obviously sending in. I've got over here a couple of the little bit of information you sort of sent in, but of course the whole idea of what we're doing here, and maybe you've heard some of these episodes that we've actually released on the podcast, is just to sort of invite people on and give them the opportunity to. I really just guess, ask their question or sort of try and aim to get help on what would be the biggest sticking point for them in their fitness journey of wherever they are right now. So, for the sake of, obviously I can see what you've written and sent over to me, but for the sake of anyone listening or watching this, what would you say is, either the biggest question that you're looking to get answered or the biggest sticking point or struggle that you feel that you're facing right now in terms of your health, your fitness journey, that if you could somehow find a way past or around that, you feel that you would get the most progress going forward?
Okay. Oh, well, Andy, I've put quite a bit of thought into this, and I'm right now, I'm 44 years old. I've led not so much of a very active lifestyle until the past, I guess, 3 years. I've started going to the gym and eating like a lot more, and I've put on some significant weight and size. But the one thing that I struggle with is, of course, the proper eating, clean eating. And a lot of people don't realize how important that is, when they say, you got to put the work in. What you do pretty much as activity, as working out, is only a small fraction as much as what you're putting in your body, how you're resting and recovering. I have a very busy life. Normally I work about a 14 to 15 hour day, and that's just including driving and getting ready. Other than that, I don't have much free time. So I dedicate a little bit of time as I can between 4 and 6 days a week to working out. Other than that, I don't follow a strict diet because I find myself limited to being able to, get the lean meats mostly is what I struggle with.
Okay.
So I just, I eat a lot of eggs and oatmeal, fruit. Processed food is a danger to the body. I know it is, but it's readily available and it's easy to access. If I were able to go like completely in, I just wouldn't be able to afford the proper nutrition. Like I said, I put on significant weight, but it's not all lean muscle.
Never is. Never is. So you've gone from being fairly sedentary, not training a whole lot, to training, obviously maybe eating more. You've put on weight. You've now put on some muscle, some fat, and that's kind of where you are now, I think, from what you've said.
Yes.
What is the specific direction you're now looking to go in? Add more muscle or drop off the body fat that you've accrued you've accrued along the way? What would be the direction that you now need to go into?
A little bit of both.
Pick one. Here comes the first lesson. Pick one direction.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying that somebody can't do both. Technically, is it possible? Yes. Is it the most optimal? After 21 years of coaching people, I would say certainly not. Because it's like the analogy I would use is, I don't know if you've ever sailed boats or ships. I haven't, but I can imagine they can only go in one direction at once, right? So yeah. The analogy I use is, for us, when it comes to either build muscle or drop body fat, we're either sailing in one direction or the other, or we're sort of sailing around in a little circle in the middle. Now, some people can make a lot of progress doing that. Oh my goodness. In the amount of people I've trained, I would say it's 5, maybe 10% of people. It's a very small amount of people who, even though I would know technically how to make it happen, whether it still or doesn't happen is now down to an individual and their genetics. So for simplicity, because one thing we should always be looking at doing and striving to achieving when it comes to this is simple. Keep things as simple as possible. It makes life a lot easier. So we now need to decide which direction to go in. Now, so therefore the question is, are you happy with the body fat levels that you currently have?
I want to be in the mid to low 10% range. And right now I haven't had an accurate measurement, but I believe that I'm in the mid 20s to upper 20s range. I want to slim down a little bit by about half of what I have. As far as like my muscle mass, I believe right now I'm pretty satisfied where I'm at.
Okay. So certainly what I would say, and I'm always here to be slightly blunt, so don't take offense. The moment we're over 15%, roughly speaking, we need to get leaner. Now, why do I? Now that's roughly. Why do I say that? Because if our goal was to build muscle, that means we need to eat in a caloric surplus, right? We need to eat more food, calories, than our body needs, so it has the energy to build muscle, extra tissue. Now, unless we're in the genetic 1%, while we're in that surplus and building muscle tissue, we are going to add body fat. There's really no way around it. Now, the more body fat we carry, the worse our body will partition those nutrients into muscle. What it tends to do is go, sod it, we'll send it to fat. Our body gets worse at what we call nutrient partitioning. So in other words, we're now putting on probably more fat than muscle. That doesn't sound like a good equation, does it? Because that's just leading us to one place. So whenever we're looking to put on muscle, we want to do it from the leanest start point possible. Because if we're at let's say we're 10%, right? Arbitrary number. If we're 10%, that means, so that's pretty lean, right? That will be like veins popping out in different places, probably a reasonably good set of abs. Like that's quite lean. That means we've got a nice long runway of being in a surplus of adding muscle until that body fat percentage has got too high. Now, let's say someone's already at 15% and they want to start adding muscle. 15% is very quickly going to become 20, which is it's going to go up. The fat accrual is going to go up quicker than the accrual of muscle, which means we're getting fatter than adding more muscle. So if you think you're in the sort of 2025, my advice is goal now, get as lean as possible, while maintaining all the muscle that you've worked so hard to accrue. And a few things are going to happen. One, you'll feel better. You lose 10 pounds, you'll look 10 pounds bigger. I guarantee you that. Okay. This is the illusion, right? When you look at most big bodybuilders, yes, they are big, but they're actually smaller in size than you think that they would really be. It's just that they've got big muscles, but they're actually in frame wise, they're generally quite small. Because they're so lean, everything looks so much bigger because the shape is so much bigger. So there's a phrase, you lose 10 pounds, you look 10 pounds bigger. It's absolutely true for 90% of people. So in other words, it feels good. Generally speaking, someone will lose body fat and they will say, but I don't want to get smaller. I'm like, but you're losing body fat, and body fat's of no real use to us at that kind of level. Yeah. Right, you know what I mean? It's like, you get below 3% and you're probably technically dead. But up until, hanging out at 10 to 12% is relatively easy for most people once you're there. So we now think that you've got a goal of let's get leaner, which is pretty cool, because starting to get lean now is smart, because I know, being leaner for summer is never a bad thing. Whereabouts do you live in the world?
Texas, in the Houston area.
Oh, that's quite funny, because about 80% of our clients live in Houston, legitimately. Okay. So, and I know you guys have great food there. So I'm fully aware of the challenges that you guys in the good old state of Texas face in terms of amazing food. But certainly, I think from what I can gather, that the goal that sort of faces you is, one, get as lean as you possibly can and maintain all the muscle that you've built. So then the question is how do we do that?
Alphas. I interrupt this show with a simple message. This show is here to benefit you and your progression to the best version of yourself. But not only just you, it's also here to benefit the people around you, your loved ones, your friends, other alphas in your vicinity. So why not do a really cool thing today? Something that I would thank you for, and maybe someone else would. Share this podcast with at least one other alpha out there who you know would benefit from it. Why not share the information, share the ability for someone else to grow? I'm sure they would thank you. I 100% would absolutely thank you. This podcast only grows by our listeners, our followers doing amazing things like giving us 5-star reviews, downloading podcasts, subscribing, and then, of course, sharing it with other people. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Share it with one person, and, of course, drop us a 5-star review, download the podcast, and, of course, subscribe. And now back to the show.
Whatever training you've done to build the new muscle that you've got, you just keep doing the same thing, because it clearly, if you know that you've added size and muscle, then whatever training you've done has worked. So don't change it. Keep it the same. Okay. So now all you're doing is you're just slow. Well, first of all, you want to get accountable and consistent with the food. And I mean, very consistent, as in you eat the same stuff every day, like day in, day out. And I know that sounds like it's horrific, but the simpler you can keep your food, the better. And if you have the same breakfast, the same this, the same that, the same this, maybe with a couple of options, you'll find life so much easier. Because it's like, imagine, I mean, okay, this is a silly example. I don't know if you have a partner or you're married or anything like that, you got a spouse or a partner, but, I know, I'm going to get shot for saying this, but I know if we're going out and my wife is looking to choose an outfit, she's going to spend a lot more time trying to pick that outfit than I'm going to pick mine, probably. In other words, it's having to think about something, whereas I'm going to wear basically very similar things every day, like food. I'm going to eat very similar things every day, one less thing to have to think about, and I'm going to be very, very consistent doing it. So, are you tracking your calories and macros daily at the moment?
No, I say no, but I kind of am. There's only a few things that I have come up with meal-wise that I've really gotten a strict calorie and macro count on. When you mention, eating the same thing over and over, I mean, that's not a problem for me, because I do have repetitive dietary habits.
Cool. That's good.
The same breakfast. I have pretty much the same breakfast every day, and that's been somewhat consistent for almost 2 years now.
Yep.
And it's just a serving of oatmeal and between 5 and 6 scrambled eggs.
Perfect. So there you've got one meal consistent. All you need to do now is find maybe 3 other meals, and one of those could just be a shake, whatever, that are also very consistent. And your goal is, in the first instance, to work out how many calories in a day do you need to take in to be in a deficit, like eating under the amount of calories that your body needs to take in to do the things it needs to do. Now, there are many ways of working it out, but there are many online calculators that you can go and use completely free that will estimate roughly what those calories might be. So you would go and work out, let's say, for example, to be in a few hundred calorie deficit, I don't know how much you weigh, but maybe that's 2,300 calories for argument's sake. Right. Okay. Right. So I need to eat 2,300 calories per day to be in a deficit. Okay. Now, of those, you would go, well, I need to eat X amount of grams of protein, X amount of grams of fat, and X amount of grams of carbs. Once you've worked those numbers out, you just hit them day in, day out, for as consecutively and consistently as you possibly can. And then your body will tell you if it's right or not. Because if it's right, you'll just start to eke down on the scales. Your body weight will just start to eke down, and you want to go slow. The faster you go, the more chance you've got of losing muscle tissue. Okay. So if you were losing, how much do you weigh?
215.
Okay. So, and how tall are you?
5'8".
Okay, cool. So let's say you were losing weight at like 4 pounds a week. If I was coaching you, I'd be like, that's a problem. And you'd say, why? And I'd be like, that's more, you're losing more than fat. Like you must be cannibalizing muscle. The rate is just too fast. So let's say, for example, 1 to 2 pounds a week. Like 2 pounds a week would be on the top edge. Like if you were losing 2 pounds a week, 2 pounds a week, 2 pounds a week, 2 pounds a week, that would be fairly aggressive fat loss. And you might start at that rate, but a pound a week for most people, it doesn't sound like a lot. But if you could see how much a pound of fat is, it's a lot. But also, 10 weeks later, you're 10 pounds of fat down, you look 10 pounds bigger, but you've lost it at such a rate, you've lost no muscle. So what I would certainly do is go away and establish what your caloric intake needs to be, use an online calculator. And then, so if you're 215 pounds, well, there's your protein worked out. Just go and eat 215 grams of protein. That's that one worked out. And then you just fill in the rest of the calories from carbs and fats roughly speaking, probably a little bit more carbs and fats. We can work it out more in a more complicated fashion than that, but roughly speaking, that's all you've got to try and do. And then I think you said have you got a fairly active job, or were you driving? I forget what you said you were doing.
I'm in construction. I'm fairly active. I walk a lot. I climb into structures. I'm a pipe fitter. So there's a fair amount of activity in my line of work.
But your body's used to that amount of activity, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what you've got to do is you've got to then do movement on top of that. But to start with, the goal would be is get the most out of the least. The least being just control food and get in a deficit. Because if you're then training as you have been doing, if that's 4 times a week, whatever that is, you continue doing that because it's worked, you've put muscle on. You then continue obviously being active with your job, but you now just become accountable and controlling of your food intake daily. Then you just, as you need to, you just drop it down, and you'll just see the scales start to come down. And then, 10, 15 weeks later, 20 weeks later, whatever that might be, you look at yourself and you're like, oh man, I'm pretty lean here. And at that point, you could look at yourself and be like, I'm really happy with where I am. I'm going to stay exactly here. I'm going to maintain this because I'm loving it. It's great. Or you might get super lean and think, I want to go off and get jacked again. But then you're then going to try and build muscle from a nice lean standpoint. So you'll get a nice long runway of staying in a surplus to add more muscle. And then the chances are that next time you need to cut, you won't be carrying as much body fat as you are now. You'll be even leaner before you start to diet. So each time you go around the whole cycle, you get bigger, but less fat to lose. Bigger, less fat to lose. Then eventually that's when you get to a physique where you're like, I don't think I need to be any bigger. And they'll get to a point where you think to yourself, another 10 pounds of muscle is not really going to help me right now. I'm just happy to stay where I am and enjoy my training and live my life and look after family and be able to do my job, and things get easier from there.
There are a few things that are coming to mind, and one of them being that I've done my own little research and looking into things, and I've seen it mentioned that as a person ages, we get into our late 30s, early 40s and beyond, our ability to synthesize protein starts to deficit. So there would be a need for maybe a different type of protein loading or an increased requirement. Do you find that to be true?
I have, yeah. So I am aware that So what we're doing there is shooting for a gram per pound of body weight, which is technically over and above what someone might need to accrue muscle. Gram per pound of body weight is, for most people, it's about the standard because one, it's easy to remember for most people, isn't it? It's just like a very simple equation, but it's also really technically a tiny bit more than most of us would need. Now, as we get older, yes, there could be a requirement to add additional protein. And the other cool thing about adding additional protein is, one, well, it's taking up caloric intake. So it's adding calories, but the chance of the protein being turned into fat is far more challenging because protein has to go through a number of other biological metabolic processes before it finally turns into fat. So you can kind of overeat on protein with a little bit more safety that the chance of those calories being turned into fat are less. So for sure, you could certainly eat a little bit more protein and say bring carbs down or fats down a little bit. One, you've ticked the box of having enough protein in there for muscle protein synthesis, but also you're kind of playing it a little bit safer in terms of that being turned into fat. Cool, man. I really do hope that the information I've been able to sort of offer over to you is useful in some way. And of course, if you've got any follow-up questions, email them in, fire them in on socials, whatever, man, like get them sent in to us. We continue to do this. So there's absolutely nothing stopping you applying again at some point and coming back on and asking some further follow-up questions. Or if you've gone off and done a bit of a cut and maybe you've hit a plateau or whatever that might be, jump back on, ask some questions. We're more than happy to have you back on again. It's been an absolute pleasure, sir. I come and tell us how things go. I wish you all the best with sorting your calories out and getting nice and shredded ready for next summer.
Yes, sir. Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
My pleasure, man. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Andy.